Hi, Owen. Thanks for being here and joining us today. So our audience just watched your directorial debut, Funny Pages. And how do you feel about that phrase right there, directorial debut?
Um, it's a phrase. I don't know. I don't. It feels like I made a couple movies within one because I've worked on this one for a really long time, about 6 years. So it is funny because it feels like I don't know. I just kept working on this movie. So it's sort of it's still a debut, So yeah.
Totally.
I don't know how I feel about the term. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
For sure. Well, your directorial debut.
Oh,
Um,
my directorial debut. Yeah, I like
yeah,
I like, yeah, me being a part of that is great. Yeah.
cool. Awesome. Well, what made you
Good,
want to, what was that?
Oh, you didn't ask if it felt good, but I said it feels really good.
Yeah,
Okay,
well, that's good to hear.
how you feeling? Feels good too. The phrase, yeah. Anyway, uh,
What made you want to go into directing? Anyway, were you always just interested in all different kinds of aspects of film? I know you have done a lot of acting.
yeah. I mean, I guess I as a kid I did this movie, The Squid and the Whale, and that movie, just gave me just kind of got the gears. You make little home movies and stuff, and my parents were acting when I was a kid a little bit, and I mean, my mom was acting when I was a kid a little bit. My dad was acting, and but those movies I didn't, you don't really see the film. It just feels like these giant, uh, mechanisms. You don't, as visiting a set, you don't really have any kind of sense of a voice, a single voice. And doing Squid and the Whale was yeah, it was just a single voice, and it was a personal 16 millimeter movie woven from the fabric of Noah's life. And that sort of set the scene for me in terms of like making, personal, a sort of personal movie like this, a comedy, and sort of a whacked out comedy even. Although that movie's, I mean, it is, it is, I think ultimately at the end of the day, that movie is a really compact comedy.
For sure. No,
But doing that, and yeah, I mean, then I all through high school, I drew comics at the same time as making little shorts and figuring things out for myself, and ended up at an art school, film school, and I'm really glad I didn't go to NYU or one of these other schools where they just kind of like try to break you the first year and have a method, and it was cartooning is a very intuitive medium, and I sort of figured that out. And I think filmmaking can be, and going to an art school, so you can go to Pratt, and you was in the basement with all these photo kids and making, you know, uh, it was a very small film program. It was like 14 kids, and 15 maybe. It was the smallest ever, and it's a very, very small aspect of the Pratt Institute. I had originally been there for cartooning and transferred. And was like, hey, I guess I want to make movies, and was just trying to figure it out on my own with all the old equipment that they had. They had uh, they had an old Eclair NPR 16 camera and some of that stuff, and a little bit of stock lying around that was given to them. And so I got to sort of play around with 16. I got to, I edit stuff on Steenbeck and did a ton of video stuff too. But yeah, I just kind of kept making stuff, and the Safdies too, actually just how they approached their college experience. I met them a little after, but they had a website called Red Bucket Films, and would put all their student films on there, but they weren't student films. They were shorts. They just tried to treat every project they did in school, whether it was some little, portrait project or whatever it was, as cinema, as a movie, and that commitment, I tried to have that, and I tried to make a ton of stuff. And when I had about an hour of, little documentaries I'd made and shorts, and I felt like, all right, well, I've made an hour of material that I can stomach myself and don't totally loathe, and like I'm ready to try to write and assemble an hour and a half thing, and
yeah.
but I had the idea in my head to do a small personal 16mm movie since I was about 13. That was the goal. It was just like, all right, at some point I'm going to make a movie. I would love to do it on film, and I would love to do it for, very little money, and that will in some way also support the creative decisions around the movie,
For
in the only way.
sure. So I'd love to get into like the background of this film too, and even in more than what you just said, because I think we can come at it of different angles of like what inspired this story. And then we can talk a little bit about the actual journey of like production and stuff. But what inspired this really funny tale? Because you, as you said, you're a cartoonist yourself.
It was a combination of sort of just, all the characters were sort of odd composites of people I've known or situations I've been in or situations I'd heard about in some way, I guess. Like, the first thing that came from this movie was this comic that I did, I think in college. Yeah, at the end of college, I did a comic called Robert in the Boiler Room. And it was basically that scene verbatim. There's maybe like one line change or something. And I think, but yeah, I did that comic. And then I was just kind of thinking, it was kind of this strange kid shows up and he's actually intrigued by this place. And that's sort of where this project manifested from that. And it was, I wrote that as a scene, and then I go, okay, well, what are you doing? And then I wrote stuff around that. It's like, well, what's the context of this kid? Who is he? Why is he going here? And yeah, and I always intended, there was this kid I knew from Princeton, New Jersey, this kind of goofy kid with a weird chip on his shoulder. And I always just thought there was something kind of funny that he was this kid from Princeton that was like haunting the Princeton Record Exchange and was playing in bands and stuff. And he was just very aloof in a way. And originally I was writing it for him, and then his voice and stuff. And so his voice is in there somewhere, but the character changed a lot. You know what I mean? And and once he became a cartoonist, that cemented a lot of things, and things grew from that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm from New Jersey too. And this.
I'm not from New Jersey. I love New Jersey, but my friend is from New Jersey. Where are you from?
Yes, I'm like right central Somerset, New Jersey. And this felt very New Jersey. So I just appreciated that. What made you like center in on that location? Was it just the inspiration from this person that you knew?
Well, partially. I mean, there's also my story in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, at 15, 15, 16, 17 or whatever, I still really wanted to be a cartoonist, which I'd wanted since I was like 8 or 9. I was just obsessed with, newspaper comics. I wanted to do a 3-4 panel thing with a punchline every day. And that was the dream. And I guess, I don't know, around like 16, 17, 18, your reflection just becomes repulsive to you, and you start to sort of come into yourself and, come into, through puberty and all the hormones and madness. And, I just was like I wasn't a particularly angry kid or anything, but I wanted to do things my way and pay my way, but I wasn't like this kid in that regard. I was pretty active in a lot of different ways, and optimistic and excited. And I actually think that this character is very optimistic. In fact, that, he's optimistic about and hopeful about hopeless people and situations,
Definitely.
I think, but yeah, I mean, I was like a kid that, when I was time to go to, I was playing in bands and, novelty bands and drawing stuff. And, I was in like a DIY comics community, DIY music community, a DIY film community. The mumblecore thing was still going on in New York, and Safdie's and Rob Bronstein were running around making these projects. And it was like, it was very exciting. That was all very exciting, and I was connected to it. I wasn't just sort of like some jaded, but I wasn't doing my homework. But I was, I was a bad student, but I feel like I was like pretty creatively stimulated, and like people weren't too worried about me. But besides like that, I wasn't going to get into college unless I got like something beyond a D, but but no, I mean, after, when I went to college, I went to Pratt. I stayed. I was like, there's no reason to leave New York. Like, why? I'm doing all this stuff. Who cares? And I went to Pratt, and I didn't want to go into the dorms. You know what I mean? The dorms were like whatever was $1,500 a month, and I was like, I found this apartment for $300, whatever. Around the corner from it, and it was not a good situation. There was a slumlord. The lock breaks. You couldn't get a hold of him.
Oh
I was
my
like,
gosh.
across punk kid from the music community. That was not the best first roommate I could have had. Uh, my computer gets jacked by his jackass friend and I have to steal it back and all this stuff, it's just kind of crazy. But yeah, that, certain things like that, I'm getting around to your question, actually, which is that I could have told the story of a kid that moves from the city to an
Mhm.
outer borough and, like trying to slum it in name the borough. But I felt like it felt more ripe or something to do it in a more hermetic seal, and New Jersey offered that in a way that New York didn't. I just wanted the guy, just sort of the sense of just trying to break away from the world, the bubble, and escape that. Felt more particular in Princeton in some way, because Princeton has a snootiness too, so it has an
Mhm.
air of like. But this kid's kind of a reverse snob. It's a different thing, But uh, but yeah, I mean that Princeton Trenton aspect of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've spent a little bit of time in Princeton, and I've spent a little time in Trenton, and they couldn't be more different. And that contrast just felt interesting, more interesting than if the kid was from Princeton and moved to the big city. I thought, you know what I mean? We'd seen that story, but
Definitely the like suburban, not really suburban, but like urban, like New Jersey setting, I feel like lended a lot to these characters. And the fact that the apartment, the like really gross apartment, was inspired by true tales, very horrifying. My thoughts are with you. But let's talk about the character too. Daniel was such a talent here. What was it like working with him?
um, Daniel's amazing.
Mhm.
He kind of appeared out of the ether because we couldn't find a kid. It was just that kind of thing where we looked everywhere and we just couldn't find the right kid. And I don't know. I think people kind of read the character as this kind of snarky guy and played him like a real like asshole or something. And I felt like Daniel brought this other element to the character that gave him some kind of pathos, because I think ultimately the character is self-destructive. You know what I mean? He's going towards self-destruction the whole movie, and then I think probably by the end of the movie he's going to turn towards self-preservation. I think that's the end that you don't get to see, maybe. But like when we read him, or he sent in a tape, and there was just this level of this sort of lashing inward and outward at the same time, uh to that he brought to those character and those lines, and didn't just play it with like tude,
Mhm.
attitude.
Love that.
And yeah, I mean, I just, we've been working on it together for so long. We shot in 2 phases, and, you know, uh, he was around a little for the construction of the thing. And, we had so many different ideas of what the character would actually do in this. And then, did a bunch of reshooting and figuring out, you just kind of keep finding the character as you go, I think. So, but he was really a part of that. And I think was that a place in his life, I mean, he had dreamed of sort of, he hated school and wanted to drop out of school and stuff like that, and felt like this character was really kind of heroic in an interesting way. And I think that probably helped and lent it to that. Now he looks at it and goes, this kid and all his decisions are so wrong and ridiculous and insane. But um, when we were first going, his perspective on it was very fresh and optimistic, and feeling like he understood what this kid was doing, and then I go in the second phase, he suddenly realized, he had some more, I don't know, there's other layers. We found other layers to the character when we went back in. And yeah.
Love that. Love that. And then the other characters, all the supporting characters and like other bit characters and lead characters. Where did you find these people? Some of them.
Wrote it for, a lot of them came from this orbit of Joe Franklin. I knew this guy, Joe Franklin. I made a short film called Jazzy for Joe about this guy, Joe Franklin. He's like a, people might not know him in LA, but was a legendary talk show host here in New York. He was the first talk show host, period. He created the format, and he was on 50, 51 or something till like the early 90s. He had about 300,000 guests. Everybody had been on the show. He got, everyone, Chaplin to Buster Keaton, all the old greats, Lillian Gish and Jerry Lewis, everybody, Bob Hope or whatever, into, and, all these silent actors, for starting to be fading stars. And then also on this show, he'd have like a guy who whistles through his nose and a guy who wrote a dieting book. And it was, like he kind of let a guy who was who's a magician and was in the Karate Kid 2 or something, for a split second. And he'd have him on it. The panels were crazy on this show. I mean, like, it would be, the Ramones and a dieting book guy and, I don't know, somebody who knew Georgie Jessel and a chorus girl who was on some Broadway. It was just like, it was variety and it was nuts. And his world, he had this office in, Joe Franklin's in Ghostbusters and Broadway Danny Rose, and, like that Broadway Danny Rose atmosphere and world of, kind of like the low rent, New York show business, it's really the Joe Franklin world. The character that tacky lounge, like a fake wannabe Sinatra lounge singer that's the lead in that movie, who's so fantastic, goes on the Joe Franklin show within the movie. And it's completely that kind of thing where they're taking, he's like Woody Allen's claiming that world as his own world, but it's totally the Joe Franklin. So he had this insane office. There's a long way to say it. He had an insane office. It's berserk. And it's just stacks and stacks of stuff and avalanches constantly of stuff knocking over. I mean, this guy owned every single old Legends hat. He would like just pull out like a carrot out of like a diamond out of a horse's ass. He just suddenly like pull out like Chaplin's hat out of a fucking pile of stuff and be like, yeah, Chaplin gave me his hat when he came on the show. Blah blah blah. Anyway, the roommates both came from Joe Franklin's. Michael Townsend Wright had just known Joe Franklin since he was 11. He's kind of doing a little bit Joe Franklin. Tiny Tim, the lead of the landlord, I guess. He was a cast member on Uncle Floyd, which is a New Jersey show that the Ramones loved. He was like a kind of vaudeville kiddie show kind of energy. And he was someone I wrote it for. He just had a certain kind of like class and dapperness to him that classiness just kind of shines through the sweat in a funny way. He's not your regular slob in some way. He's not just some guy who belches. He's kind of charming, or he kind of, I don't know. He's just kind of dapper. It's a weird character. And then, Cleveland, who he shares the bedroom with, was one of Joe Franklin's assistants, and would answer two phones all the day long. Lunatics. It was an open door, so all these characters kind of flood in this place. You know what I mean? All the 300,000 people who'd been on the show were like, who felt like Joe had made them or whatever. Whether it was a guy who like twisted balloon animals that kind of, or whatever. Like small time show business is just so beautiful and funny, and especially New York, and I mean I think it's kind of bleaker in LA, but in New York it's at least very charming. But no, in LA is full of great, my favorite thing in the world is like riding the buses in LA and like, I don't know, like Eddie D. I remember meeting Eddie Dees on the bus. He was like going to an audition. Like everybody's just, LA's so vast. Everybody's just drowning, in this gigantic place. And, but are you in LA?
Yes, I am.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And it is big.
It's sort of long day. I'm just kind of rambling and stuff. But what was the question again? I'm sorry. Oh no, yeah, Cleveland was an assistant. He directed before. I made this Joe Franklin movie, and he was like, I didn't think he would want to be a part of it because he worked for Joe, and then he called me afterwards because I'd used other assistants. I wish I'd been a part of this. And if you ever have a part for me, dramatic, I can play drama, I can play comedy, I can play romance. And I was like, okay, well, write a part for you. And I thought he was excellent. It was his first time acting.
Love that.
Yeah, there are no non-actors. There's only first timers, I think.
Nice. Yeah, for sure. Totally. And like,
I just feel like because there's certain, in a non-performer, you get some, like the when you turn on a camera for an actor, they go from this to some other thing and they step into a mode and it becomes inherently false by the fact that they're coming in with a craft and technique but like you can get something more raw with a non-performer, especially the people that I try to look for is, in terms of if you're not a trained actor, is you don't change a molecule once the camera starts going. Your personality, you manage to just be present and stay the same in some way. You know what I mean? You're actually kind of capturing for the person and then trying to provide the right material for them to thrive. It's totally customized towards them. And that's really interesting, putting actors and non-actors in that way together. And, like Daniel, in a lot of ways, in some ways, with certain actors, he was directing, you're sort of casting the director of the scene to be the protagonist, because they have to sort of get improv out of somebody. But the movie was very written, but there are a couple moments like that where Daniel actually had to sort of direct within the scene,
For sure. I feel like A24 has kind of like a knack for that when I watch the film. So I thought this was a great fit of like these characters who it's like they act like that in real life too. So
I mean, yeah, but like, again, it's like you want to kind of blur the lines there, like I was just talking about this, like, I cast all these cartoonists for the movie in a way, you know what I mean? I cast all the characters
yeah.
hands or something, and
How
like
was
they
that?
have different styles and voices and everything, and that contrast is fun, but it's the kind of thing where, like anything, it's like the work has to sort of match the character and their ideals and their sensibilities, and says everything about who they are in some way. So it ends up kind of lending something, even like it's like lending something to the world of the movie. And I mean, just to peer into, like, it's like you get to peer into someone's psyche a little bit more than you would with just just from the dialogue you provide them with. There's some kind of interior landscape that you're kind of like, get to sort of present. And it gives people even more context and makes it, I think, more relatable or personal, because they're trying and they've made something. I don't know. I feel like it even humanizes Wallace when he shows up in his pages at the end in some way. But
Yeah.
But it was with the character things, like, with the comics and the people and the sort of personalities, and it's just sort of like in an old cartoon or something, when, like, the dog looks like the person or something, but or like, just like, or even like the like some drawing of a illustration of a bookstore or something, and it's like this guy is holding this book and that guy's holding that book. And I was thinking about in the comic book store, I was thinking about it, the cartoonists, like, what is the thing someone is making? What is the thing somebody's holding? And what does that say about them in that way? Like, and you can do so much of that, like what comic book Andy Milonakis is reading in the comic store is different than the thing that, like, Miles is picking up, or, the superhero kind of comics oriented owner is, recommending, or what have you.
Yeah. Lots of intention. No, that's great. And speaking of A24, well, the Safdies a little bit, we've been talking about them. How has your relationship with the Safdie brothers developed, and as well as like working with A24, how have those relationships been, and how did they kind of start?
Oh, great. I mean, like I met the Safdies, though, like, when I was 15 or something, because I was a fan of their the shorts that they were doing in college. Yeah. And Josh moved to New York from Boston University, and it was interesting. They were already sort of heralded by Ray Carney, who wrote Cassavetes on Cassavetes and this great Mike Lee book. And they were already like these kind of like wonderkins, like coming out of BU. And Josh moved to New York with his friend Sam Lazenko, who's a production designer. It's great. He designed Good Time, he designed Good Gems, all of their stuff before that too. And they just started to make stuff. I mean, the thing that I really learned from them more than anything is never ask permission, basically. I mean, I remember shooting this one thing with a friend of ours, that Josh was directing, and it was in Chinatown, and, in 2006 or 7 or something like that. And I was holding the boom, and, two friends of ours, he sent them into a Chinese food restaurant. I mean, they're pranksters too, like they love like hidden camera stuff, and they're always interested in blurring those lines a little bit between, documentary and narrative and everything, and trying to,
Totally.
But I remember like filming in a Chinese food restaurant. He's just filming through the glass, I mean, it's extra glass on a lens, like you can get something kind of interesting if you're shooting through glass. But he's shooting, but we don't have permission to shoot there. We're outside of the restaurant. It's nighttime, and they're eating there, and it's, like eventually somebody comes and kicks us out. And it's like, you can't be filming a restaurant. But it's like a great shot. You know what I mean? It's the kind of thing where you immediately realizing, like 15, 16, like it's maybe more interesting to shoot it that way, and you're going to get more of an interesting thing than if it's just sort of like reverse shot at a dinner table. You know what I mean? And that in some way that's that creative decision is made on a out of necessity. That was filmmaking to me, and I learned cartooning intuitively. I learned filmmaking intuitively because I went to an art school, film school, because I didn't do NYU, because you just sort of like figure out how you do it and how you use a camera until somebody tells you that's not the way to do it, and maybe this is a better way to shoot this or that, and you find your voice. But it was mostly intuitive for me in that way, and that was definitely a learning lesson in that way of, especially with a comedy. I mean, it's amazing, when you're rushing. I mean, you get to sort of, if you can create intention around the errors in that way. You know what I mean? Like, I remember shooting that scene in when they're, like Cheryl is giving the tour of the courthouse,
Yeah.
and, the door keeps slamming, and, we want to open it, but it keeps slamming. And it's just like, okay, well, it's going to take 5 minutes for them to like figure out some kind of a rig where they can put a, pad down so that doesn't slam. But I just go, no, it's funny. You add a line, you just slam, it keeps slamming. Yeah, it does that, she says, something like that.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
like the movie is chock full of these things, like so many, so much humor comes out of necessity, and necessity and lack of resources, I'll say,
For sure.
And like, I knew it in terms of narrative, you know what I mean? I know it's like, oh, okay, you're rushing on a set, you only get one, this is a oneer, you don't have time to get the coverage of, close up of this and that. Like, this is just a oneer, and you have to find a way to make it work. If it starts raining or something, okay, well, we can't pretend that it's not raining. We have to make this funny in some way and use the rain because the rain is here. So that never happened, but thankfully it didn't rain. But
yeah, no, playing to your environment and just being adaptable as a filmmaker like that, that's really amazing. Especially with like the door, like, oh, let's just write it in. So amazing. What is next for you? What do you think?
I wrote another comedy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
It's a secret.
I'm still figuring it out.
For sure.
Well, I mean, this movie took 6 years. I'm like, I'm never too sure about it. And, I'm always very skeptical of the work. So I'm sort of just like, I'm just drafting it. And it's almost ready. It's, like it's I don't know, you're still finding it, and it can always be funnier too, so.
Totally. Well, I'm sure the audience and everyone is very much looking forward to your next piece. I really loved this one.
Except that one guy, right?
Yeah, right there. Thank you so much, Owen and Imani. I'm one of the programmers with the American Cinematheque, and thank you so much, Owen Kline, for talking about your film Funny Pages today and showing us. Thank you, A24.
Yeah, a pleasure. So nice to meet you.